Hello and welcome to CEO Stories, a new podcast from the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce. I'm your host, Henrietta, and each episode I delve into the journey and mind of one of our region's leading or up-and-coming CEOs. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Deb Leary, CEO and founder of Forensic Pathways Limited, who also happens to be the president of the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce. Welcome, Deb. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for asking me, Henrietta. I'm delighted to be on. Thank you.
Now, for those who may not know you, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your business?
Yes, certainly. Forensic Pathways, I started back in 2001, and we've also got a brand, Clarify Eye. So basically, the company is a forensic and threat intelligence business, developing technologies and products for law enforcement and for businesses who are focused on reputation management and threat intelligence.
Fantastic. That's obviously an ever-evolving, fast-changing world to be in. What would 10-year-old Deb think about what you're doing now?
10-year-old Deb would be incredibly proud of what I'm doing now. If I was to put myself back at secondary school when I was seeing my careers teacher for the first time, and he asked me what I wanted to be when I left school, and I said I wanted to be a photographic journalist. And, I'm from Birmingham, and it was about 1976 or something. And he didn't really know what a photographic journalist was. So he said to me, what about nursing or the civil service? Well, nursing I thought was a calling, not something that you just chose to do. And I didn't know what a civil servant was. So those weren't choices open to me. And my passion even then was about experiencing new things and travel. So now looking back at where I am now and all the things I've done over the past 20 years and all the travel that I've done, you should be proud because I've done it in a different way.
Fantastic. Well, let's dig into that. Let's explore that journey and how you got from a potential photographic journalist to what you're doing today. What was your first job? How did you start your career?
My first job was working as a PA for a law firm in Birmingham. So I was predominantly doing work around criminal law. So I'd go to the local prisons and I'd support the solicitor and the lawyer at the time. So it's mostly criminal work and business, company work.
And from there, how did your career evolve? Did you stick around in sort of a legal PA work, or did you develop from there?
I didn't actually. I was meant to be being trained up as a legal exec, but yes, he was an interesting character, so it never quite happened. But that's a whole different podcast. So then I got a job working for the police and working in the antecedents department, which was okay, but it was more money, but not quite as exciting. And then my next job was a job working for the Independent Broadcasting Authority, working for the local radio officer, which was really fantastic because I was involved with all the local radio stations, which was great. And then once I had kids, particularly when I had my daughter, my second child, I didn't really want to go back to work per se. I wanted to do something, but I didn't want to go back to an office. And so I set up my own secretarial business, Chatsworth Secretarial Services, it was called. And it was at the time of Maggie Thatcher, and there was money available to go for training on business. So that's what I did. And eventually then, after a few years doing that, I got my long-term job, which was working for Fairfax School in Sutton Coldfield, originally as a receptionist, and then became office manager and training and development manager at the school. And I stayed there for about 10 years until I started Forensic Pathways.
And tell us about that, because this is obviously quite a different career change from where you've been up to date. And I believe it was sort of a fortuitous occasion that gave you the idea for Forensic Pathways. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think I'm naturally nosy. I'm very curious. And I don't mind asking stupid questions. I ask them all the time, so that's fine. But during the time I was working at the school, I didn't go to university when I left school. And so when I was working at the school, I thought I'd start my degree part-time. So I did my degree in English Language and Literature at BCU, it was then UCE. And I just finished that and was just starting my master's actually, when I managed to get a teaching job at Sutton Coldfield College. So I was meant to be starting this job. I got 3 weeks off before I left Fairfax and then started my new job at Sutton Coldfield. And my husband was in the police force, and he was heavily involved in things like the DNA database setup. He'd done his PhD whilst a serving police officer, and had created a software called Flints, which was forensic-led intelligence system, which was all about bringing data together. And he was going off to speak at a police conference in Toronto. And it just so happened it was during these 3 weeks that I was off. So he invited me along and said, come to Canada, have a holiday. I like photography, so it was an opportunity to go and do some photography. And so that's what I did. So I turned up in Toronto, and I remember the night before the conference started, he said to me, there's a party to get the conference started, come along to the party. And I sort of didn't really want to go because I didn't know anything about policing or forensics, even though we'd been married for a long time. We didn't talk about work. And he dragged me along. So, and I sort of got curious then. I started listening to people. And it was the next day when the conference launched, I went in to be nosy. And there was a guy called Dr. Henry Lee, who was a lead on the O.J. Simpson case. And Henry had put up the crime scene photos and was talking about the mismanagement of the crime scene. And for some bizarre reason, I got the hotel notepaper there and I started making notes, because I started thinking about my English degree and about literary theory and how stories are put together. I thought, well, how do investigators put their stories together? Because they're in a unique position, because they're the reader of the scene, but they're also the author of the narrative. And so I made some notes, which later on I wrote a paper on the art of storytelling in police investigation as a result of that. But it was when I was in the bar where all the best stories come together. And I was in the bar and I was sitting with everybody, and I didn't know anything. I was just listening to the conversations. And there was a conversation between a UK police officer and a Canadian police officer, which always sounds like a bit of a joke. And they were talking about product and process. And the UK guy said, well, at all major crime scenes, we use a stepping plate. The Canadian guy said, sorry, don't know what a stepping plate is. I didn't know what one was, but for some bizarre reason, I've scribbled down on the hotel notepaper, find out about stepping plates, found open market, set up company. No idea why I did it. I've still got the copy of the paper. With all my doodles on when I got bored in the sessions. And came home and I said to Richard, my husband, I said, can I get hold of a stepping plate? And he sort of rolled his eyes thinking, what's this woman doing next? And so he arranged for me to pick one up from, I think it was Bromford Lane Police Station. And I was expecting a scientific piece of equipment, and what it actually was a piece of aluminium tread plate, which was 350 by 350. And they put them down at a crime scene so you can walk on the scene without contaminating it. And I was really disappointed. I thought, well, for a start off, they're really heavy. You couldn't stack them. If you put them down on laminate flooring, they would skid when you stepped on them. And importantly, you couldn't see your crime scene. So how do you put the story together if you can't see what's happened? So I cranked up Google, because in 2001 we were all on dial-up, and looked for a transparent stepping plate and found that there wasn't one. So basically I went on to invent the world's transparent stepping plate for the forensic market. And that's how the business started. And, it was a case of, I travelled to Liverpool to meet a company who had been exhibiting at the conference in Canada. And they made plastic stuff for labs. So I thought, well, they can make these things. I'll just take a royalty and I'll carry on teaching. And when I got to see them, they said, no, this is plastic injection moulding, which I didn't know what that was. And they put me in contact with a couple of guys who could help. And then began the journey of looking for funding, because obviously I've got no money. And when I saw the guys, they quoted me £250,000 to do the tooling. I laughed at that because I'd only got my family allowance, my child benefit, and my teaching salary, so it wasn't going to happen. So I told them to go away and come up with something better. So basically, while they went off to find something better, I put together the world's worst marketing literature and sent it out with a mock-up stepping plate and sent it out to every police force in the UK. And I got a phone call one Thursday from a police officer wanting to buy 50. And I had to confess that they didn't exist and said, but don't worry, I'll get them to you in 18 months. I don't know where 18 months came from. I made that up as well. And then the guys came back and said, well, we can get the tooling made in China for at 60,000. So I got a SMART award from the government to do a prototype. And then I got a loan from the bank for 60,000. And the first plates came off in about May 2003.
That's incredible. How did that feel? Going from sort of a relatively stable career in education to taking that risk, taking out that loan and going into business?
I worry about myself sometimes. Sometimes I think, when I look back, I think, were you insane? I was just totally convinced that this was what was, and of course, because that guy had contacted me and said, I want 50, and the mock-up was absolutely appalling. I mean, I wouldn't have sold it even if I got 50. They were absolutely awful. And then, interestingly, the company who made the aluminium plates contacted me and told me I was wasting my time because they got the monopoly in the market for the stepping plates. I thought, look, this is a sign. These are two signs. But I was still convinced that fundamentally it wasn't about the product. It was about the purpose of the product, and the purpose and the product together was right. So I just went for it. And bless his heart, my husband. I signed up for an office in Tamworth in probably the November before I'd even got the tooling from China. And I sat in that office in January 2003. I got no clients, just me and a fax machine, and just went for it. And that was the start.
And had you ever thought about setting up a business before? Was there anything sort of in your background that lent itself to this entrepreneurial spirit, or was it just a real sort of lightning bolt moment?
Oh, I think I blame my parents. I mean, my parents were beyond being phenomenal. My dad was started off as a butcher, but then had worked for a family, not our family, but a family butcher's firm across the West Midlands, and became sales director. And my dad was like an entrepreneur. He was the one who went into the shops, and when they were going down or failing, he'd go in and he'd re-energise it, get things going. So he was very much like that. My mum was the one who was always looking for the next big thing, and so the Evening Mail on a Thursday, when all the jobs were in, she was always looking for the next big thing, and so I remember as a kid coming home from school, walking towards the house, and the biggest greenest transit van was sitting on the drive, and I walked through the side door to go through to the garage into the kitchen, and I couldn't see the other side of the garage because it was full of plants, and my mum had gone for a job. And it was doing the floral arrangements in banks and buildings. And but they'd failed to tell her that she'd got to bring all the stock home with her. So hearing my dad used to come home the same time every night. And I sat on the stairs waiting for my dad to battle his way through the garage. And all I heard was, bloody hell, Mark, what you done now? And my mum was saying, no, don't start, Mick. So that sort of sort of creativity and looking for newness, looking for something to change and make better. I think that's where it comes from.
I have to say, as a fellow English literature graduate, I do find that ability to apply creative thinking to a really scientific area just absolutely fascinating and a great way of looking differently at an issue. Now, where are we? We're in 2001. You've got a little office in Tamworth. You've got a few clients starting to grow among UK police forces. What happened next? How did you develop the business?
Well, it was perfect timing really, because just at that point, all the great shows like CSI New York and all of those TV shows came out, and all the kids wanted to be forensic scientists. But the universities, they did great science, but they didn't do forensic science. So I got together a group of retired investigators and senior crime officers, and we put together practical forensics courses, and we started teaching the lecturers at the universities before they taught the kids. And that was the next thing that happened. And things like that always seem to happen to me, because it was like I went to a police force and I walked into the guy's office and his office was full of boxes. And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Don't ask me." He said, "I'm really cross. Procurement have bought all these digital cameras. We don't use digital cameras. Who uses digital cameras?" He said, "We don't know what to do with them." I said, "Well, I can sell you a digital forensic course if you like, photography course." And so I signed them up to a course. I had to get people in to develop that course because I hadn't got one at the time. And that was sort of the spark to me. Well, obviously we've got the crime scene element going on, but policing is clearly moving into digital forensics, and with everybody using mobile phones and the impact on imagery as well, because of taking photos with the use of the mobile phone, I thought this is where digital forensics is going. By that time, it was around about 2005, 2006. Richard, my husband, had retired from the police force. He came in to work with me. We developed technologies around digital forensics, looking at the management of mobile phone data. We launched a technology called Forensic Image Analyzer, which looks at the unique signature within an image. So if we've got a group of images, we can say those images have been taken by an iPhone 7. And if we had a million iPhone 7s in the room, we'd be able to tell you exactly which iPhone 7 took those images. So if you imagine it's stages, for us it's been stages. Started off with crime scene, moved into digital forensics because that's where the market was going. And throughout that sort of period, we became well known for our ability to handle data and investigate data. So right from the get-go, really, we started from that point, doing work for companies around background investigations, due diligence, and looking at data from that point of view. And then if we fast track forward into to now, apart from developing those technologies, and we've done other work in the ballistics area, developing new technologies and getting funding through things like Innovate UK. If we fast forward to 2016, we got approached by an organisation called CFAS, who are the National Fraud Database and Membership Organisation. And they were very interested in what was going on with online fraud. So at that point, we started already looking at what was going on the dark web. We were always looking at open web because we were investigators. So, doing due diligence work and background investigations for companies. We were always looking at what's on the open web, but we hadn't looked at what was going on in the dark web. So in 2016, we started developing a technology called Dark Search Engine, and we now monitor the dark web 24/7 on behalf of clients. So if any of their data is being sold on the dark web, we can get to that quickly and alert them. And we've gone on to develop other things around getting behind marketplaces on the dark web, because sometimes you know, when you go onto a website and you have to put in, oh, I can see 3 traffic lights, it's capture. We can get behind capture as well, which is really important to do. And the important thing about that is, you know, it's covering all the threats, because a lot of businesses, they don't know they've had a data breach for probably 200 days. And our system actually refreshes every 4 hours. So it's a big change. So if you think about the way the business has evolved, it's really preempted the trends. And in 2020, we decided to launch a new brand, still within Forensic Pathways, and that brand's Clarify Eye. And Clarify Eye has all our threat intelligence work together. So dark web investigations, social media investigations, background and due diligence, simulated phishing campaigns and cyber awareness training, all of that type of work. So we're sort of a one-stop shop, if you like.
It's brilliant how you've just kept, as you say, anticipating those market moves and getting ahead of it with the product development. On the other side of the business, on sort of employing people, how have you found that? Because that's one area where when we speak to entrepreneurs, that moment where you take on your first member of staff can be quite a learning curve, both in terms of what's required from an employer, but also as a business owner, giving up a little bit of control in effect.
Yeah, I mean, that's always people are always the hardest thing, because we're all an unknown quantity. And even when you're a known quantity, you can become an unknown quantity. So it's all, dealing with people is always interesting. We've been very fortunate throughout the years, particularly when we've been developing technology, that we've worked very closely with the universities. So throughout the period, we've sponsored I think about 4 or 5 PhDs in the 20 years, which is a big investment for a small business, but we've got so much out of it. And we've always felt that, you know, in developing technology, we've got to have that academic rigor as well. It's not just about selling a product, it's what goes behind it and educating the market. I think the hardest part is not so much, sometimes it's not the skill base that's the hardest part. Sometimes it's the cultural part, the ethos of the person that you want, and making sure that choice is right. On some things you can train people up, on other things it's not quite so easy. But we've been very fortunate. We've had a few ones that haven't quite panned out, but that's life. But on the whole, we've been very fortunate.
And on that sort of ethos and workplace culture, how do you approach that? What's the sort of atmosphere you're looking to create with your team?
Ownership of the work that they're doing, and how they can affect that work. You know, they know that I am not a coder. I can't code. And they know that I'll come up with, or I or Ben or any of us will come up with ideas that are challenging. But they're very much given a free rein. We don't, unless there's a deadline, we don't care when they work. We just need them to do the work and for it to be the standard, and to engage with our clients in a positive way. So it's about ownership and giving that freedom to have ownership for what they're doing, and to have responsibility for what they're doing.
And onto another big learning curve for a business of any shape or size, going global. It sounds like that sort of global view has been part of your organisation's DNA, right from where you got the idea at an international conference. But how did you approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, when I started Forensic Pathways, I always knew that it was going to be globally focused. You know, the forensic market is a huge market, and the opportunities are vast. That's a challenge in itself, because you can go with a scattergun approach. I can never say that word, and that can be a challenge. But for me, it was always going to be an international business, because the problems are international, and the solutions can be international too. So my first trip internationally was actually to Turkey, to Istanbul, and that was with UKTI as it is now, and with their support. And I took myself to a conference. Just me and one other person with a stand and all of that. And I think that was probably about 2004. I'll still never get over the terror of seeing I think it was about £2,000 stand hanging out the back of a very yellow taxi driving at high speed through Istanbul. Well, I did ask for a very large one instead, but they never they never provided it to me. But it was a great experience, and I've enjoyed those experiences ever since.
And is there anything you've learned along the way as you've been sort of doing business internationally, setting up internationally? I know you've got a team over in Australia. Is there anything that sort of really stood out to you as that was a real learning moment?
Understanding that somebody nodding their head doesn't mean yes. That's been an interesting one. I think that's the largest one, and also really being culturally aware and making sure you do your research beforehand. I think that's the most important thing of all, and acknowledging that whether that person's from China, France, or wherever they may be, they're still having a human experience. So just be human.
Be human. Perfect. And on to sort of another cultural question. You've been really leading the field in what might traditionally be seen as quite male-dominated areas. Manufacturing, policing, forensics, now into IT security. Has your gender ever been perceived as a barrier, as an issue? Is there any sort of preconceptions you've had to face in your career?
Do you know what? I've never put that sort of barrier or thought in my head. So for me, I've been oblivious in a sense to it. I've just rocked up and turned up and not thought about it, and it's not part of my thought process. However, when things have happened, I see it as an opportunity to educate, and I think that's in a gentle way, but I think it's important to educate. I have been in a room where people have talked to my colleague next to me rather than addressing me, and been quite, it's been quite a difficult meeting. But educating them was quite fun.
Yeah, you don't strike me as someone who'd let that one go.
No, let's just say when they were saying, well, I said, well, thank you, gentlemen. Clearly, you don't need any help from me, so I'll leave you at this point. And I've never seen so many men run down a corridor so quick in their lives. But we laughed about it afterwards. I said, well, I was a bit harsh on you, but I needed you to realise it was me you were needing to address.
Now, speaking of speaking up, you're involved in a lot of different external activities, everything from, you mentioned DIT, being a DIT export champion. I think you're involved in a all-party parliamentary group for women in enterprise, all sorts of different types of things external to your business. Do you want to just tell me a little bit about what motivates you to get involved in these, and perhaps talk us through some of those brilliant things that you're involved in?
It's that nosy thing again. I'm really interested in how things fit together, and I think everything's connected. From the APPG, sort of women in enterprise. I mean, I've got granddaughters. I've got a daughter, and I'm really passionate about raising awareness of, and signposting women as well to where things aren't right, or where we can make a difference, and signpost government to what's going on as well. So that's a I've been involved in that for a number of years. So another one that I'm involved in is the United Nations Global Compact, the UNGC. The company Forensic Pathways, we're a signatory to the UNGC, so we have to report annually.
Do you want to just tell us a bit about what the Global Compact is for those who maybe less aware?
Absolutely. So the UNGC was set up by Kofi Annan in 2001, and it's to encourage businesses to think about their corporate social responsibility and how they approach it. It focuses on 4 key areas: labour and human rights, anti-corruption and bribery, the environment, and the main part about it is that companies then can use this as a platform, as a way of reporting on their progress with regards to the sustainable development goals and how they're approaching CSR in general. So I've been a member of that now since about 2006. I am actually on the advisory group, specifically focused on SMEs for me, actually. So I'm encouraging SMEs to join the UNGC because it helps on brand, it helps on employee retention. You know, our world is very sophisticated now. Our people know who they want to join as a business, what that business needs to look like, and you know, it helps on things like procurement as well. You know, because you're looking at how you're engaging with your stakeholders, your employees, your supply chain, all of that. So it's fundamental to business as far as I can see.
It gives a very clear framework, like you say, if people are thinking, how do I track my impact? It sounds like it's quite a simple structure to work towards.
Yeah, and then I'm involved with Funny Women, which was set up by a fabulous woman called Lynn Parker. Funny Women encourages and supports new female comedic talent coming through, but also importantly, it works with businesses to help women find their authentic voice, and give them the confidence in terms of presenting, and just giving them more confidence really to have a voice. You know, I think when we're at school, we leave our personality outside the classroom door sometimes, because that's what we're taught to do. We have to conform, and you know, I think that carries on into the world of work. And when you are presenting, I think it's sad if you leave your personality outside that door. That's what people are coming to see. They're coming to see you, and they're coming to hear about your experiences. So yeah, I have great fun with Funny Women. It's a fabulous organisation. Though doing stand-up comedy for the first time was slightly terrifying.
How did that happen? How did you end up doing stand-up comedy for the first time?
It was very cruel of Lynn Parker. We were at a meeting in London. I had not met her before, and it was a women in business event. And she happened to say that she was doing a charity challenge, getting business women who had never done comedy before to raise money for charity. And I was rushing for a train, so she said, would I do it? And I just said yes. And I never thought about it. And then the next thing I knew, I was having to write my script for my sort of 5-minute stand-up, and having to perform it in front of a panel of about 3. And remember, the set started off really positively and they were laughing a lot, and then halfway through it started to flag and nobody was laughing at anything. And basically I said, well, I'll stop there, shall I? And I'll cut that bit out. And then I had to perform it at a hotel in London. I think there was about 250 people there, and I was the first one on, so no pressure.
Can you remember your best joke?
Yeah, it was actually it was about my speech impediment, because I do have one, and it was because it was a London audience. I said a lot of people don't realise it, but I have got a speech impediment. This is a Birmingham accent. And then I said, actually, no, I really do have a speech impediment. When I was younger, I couldn't say anything with the words beginning with F, S, or T. But when I got married, I sort of got cured. And there you go. But yeah, that was it. And I've supported Funny Women since that time, and it's a great organisation. It really is.
Now, you are an OBE in recognition of all that you do for the business community. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how it felt to be recognised in that way?
It was surreal and amazing. When the letter came through the door, I couldn't. I was actually in Iceland when the letter arrived, not the shop. I was actually in Iceland, the country, and my husband rang me when I was over there. He said, "You've had a letter come," and I said, "Well, I'll just open it." And it was just an amazing experience. And we always laugh because Richard had been awarded an MBE a few years earlier, so I out trumped him. But it was a phenomenal experience, and I took my two kids and my mum and dad in for the investiture, and it was really, really wonderful.
Oh, fantastic. And now, obviously the greatest honour of your career is that you are now the president of the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce.
Absolutely.
You've got quite a 2-year term coming up, with Commonwealth Games on the horizon, lots of change, lots of things going on. What are you looking to achieve with your presidency of the Chamber? Have you got sort of a vision and key priorities in mind?
For me, I think the key priorities are around international trade, collaboration and innovation. We've got a lot going on in this region, a lot of fantastic companies who are innovating, whether that's to do with sustainability or digital in terms of security. We've got a lot going on. And, with the Commonwealth Games coming on, international, why not? It's the most important thing to be focusing on because of that. But I it's not just about what the things that we're making. It's also about what this region represents. What does Greater Birmingham represent? And with all the trauma that's going on in the hospitality industry at the moment, we've really got to shout about how fabulous our region is, and that this is the place. When people can, this is the place to come to.
Fantastic. Now, thinking back over this career, over from hoping to be a photographic journalist through to having an inspiration strike at an international conference, and then where you are today, running this incredible business, are there any leaders and individuals that have inspired you along the way?
Do you know what? I'll come back to basics. I'll come back to my mum and dad, because it's through their creativity, their zaniness, but their awareness of people. They've got a real awareness of people. Whether it was my dad working in those shops and in the markets in Birmingham, and bringing people along, to my mum, who with her compassion for the things that she was doing too, because she ended up working for the NHS. It's all about people.
And if you could offer just one piece of advice to an aspiring CEO, what would it be?
Think of three things, the three key things: people, places, planet. Think about those things, because it's about the people and the impact that you have, whatever country you're in, and the impact that you have on the planet. So those are people, places, planet. And I think that fits in nicely with some of the stuff that we're going to be doing next year.
Fantastic. Do you want to tell us about some of the stuff we're going to be doing next year?
Yeah, so we've got the Good Business Forum coming on, starting on the 11th of January. So that's going to be, I'm really looking forward to it. It's bringing businesses, academia, all together, talking about, what does it mean? What does doing good business mean? What should it look like? And this isn't just about doing a charity event. This is about the fundamental element of what makes your business the business to come to.
Fantastic. That purpose, it's really something that's echoed throughout everything that you've said today, that real sense of purpose and drive. And I'm really looking forward to working with you over the next couple of years. Well, thank you so much, Deb. I could ask you about 100 more questions today, but we've come to the end of our allotted time.
Oh, bless you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And thank you everyone for listening. Of course, you can subscribe to CEO Stories wherever you get your podcasts. Please do so. And don't forget to follow us on the social medias. That's at GRB Ham Chambers on Twitter and Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce on LinkedIn and Facebook. Thank you again, listeners. Thank you, Deb. Look forward to hearing from our next CEO in our next episode.
Thank you, Henrietta.